The heavy oak doors of the Grand Elm event venue loomed before me. I smoothed down my simple navy dress, a nervous flutter in my stomach. My sister Madison's birthday gala was the social event of her season, and for the first time I'd been personally invited. I took a deep breath and stepped into the glittering foyer. The air smelled of expensive perfume and flowers. Well-dressed guests mingled, their laughter echoing. I spotted Madison immediately, holding a champagne flute and holding court. She looked flawless. I moved toward the check-in, my heart lifting. But as I approached the podium, the venue manager, a man named Mr. Albright, stepped directly into my path. His expression was pained. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, his voice low. "But your name isn't on the list." My smile faltered. "There must be a mistake." "Madison Sinclair? I'm her sister." He shook his head, avoiding my eyes. I glanced past him and saw Madison watching us, a tiny, cold smirk playing on her lips. My face began to burn. Mr. Albright leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Ma'am, I think you should see something." Confused and humiliated, I followed Mr. Albright a few steps away from the bustling entrance. He pulled a crisp sheet of paper from a leather folder. It was the official guest list. My eyes scanned the alphabetized names, and there it was, Sinclair, Nora. But it wasn't just omitted. A thick, angry stroke of black marker had been drawn through my name. It was deliberate. It was a message. The initial sting of rejection curdled into something else, something cold and hard in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't an oversight. My own sister had publicly disinvited me. I looked from the damning list back to Madison, who now feigned ignorance, chatting animatedly with a friend. The hurt was being swiftly replaced by a clear, controlled anger. Mr. Albright shifted uncomfortably. He saw the understanding dawning on my face. He hesitated, looking genuinely troubled. "There's more," he murmured. "Your sister said something else when she gave me this list. I think you deserve to know." I braced myself, my fingers tightening around the strap of my purse. "What did she say?" Mr. Albright looked deeply embarrassed. "She told me to be sure to turn you away if you showed up. She said you were embarrassing and pathetic. That you wouldn't understand the elegance of the evening." Each word felt like a physical slap. "She said you, and I quote, bring down the energy of any room. She insisted you weren't elegant enough for her theme." The heat in my face intensified, and for a moment, I thought I might cry. The whispers of nearby guests felt like needles on my skin. They had overheard everything. But as I stood there, absorbing the cruelty, something shifted inside me. The tears didn't fall. Instead, a fierce resolve ignited. I would not let her break me. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the main hall. A frustrated guest in a tuxedo stormed past us, heading for the exit. "This is ridiculous," he snapped to his companion. "Absolute disorganization inside. I'm not waiting around for a drink." Mr. Albright winced at the man's words. My gaze followed the disgruntled guest out before turning back to the party. Through the large glass panel separating the foyer from the main event space, I could see the cracks in Madison's perfect facade. Staff in black uniforms were scrambling, their movements frantic. A server nearly dropped a tray of hors d'oeuvres. A large floral arrangement on a pedestal listed dangerously to one side. In the center of it all, Madison was gesturing sharply at a young waitress, her smile gone, replaced with a scowl. The manager sighed softly beside me. "She lowballed us on the final payment," he confessed, almost to himself. "But demanded all the extravagant extras. We're stretched too thin." He looked at me, a new thought in his eyes. "Honestly," he said, "we're short-staffed tonight. If you hadn't been crossed off, we were actually supposed to ask if you could help." I blinked, pulled from my anger by his unexpected words. "Help? How?" Mr. Albright explained quickly. "Our lead event assistant called in sick an hour ago. It's chaos. The owner, Mrs. Vance, she mentioned your name. She remembered you from the community charity gala a few months back. You volunteered and kept the silent auction running smoothly when things got busy. I remembered that night. I'd enjoyed the organized chaos. Mrs. Vance was impressed. She said if we ever needed part-time coordination, we should call you first. The irony was almost too much. Madison had barred me from entering as a guest, but the venue itself wanted me here as staff. Inside, Madison's voice rose above the din as she blamed a bartender for a spill. Mr. Albright's face hardened. That was her fault, he muttered. She bumped into him. He turned to me, a determined look on his face. Would you be willing to step in? Right now? If only as a neutral witness to all this. I looked at the chaos, at my sister's entitled anger, and then at Mr. Albright's hopeful, desperate face. The cold anger in my stomach solidified into a decision. This was a way in. Not as a scorned sister, but as a professional. Yes, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I can help. His relief was immediate. Thank you. Please, follow me. We entered the main room, and the shift in dynamics was instant. Guests who had seen me being turned away now saw me walking purposefully with the manager, a small radio in my hand. Their curious glances now held a hint of respect. I saw Madison from the corner of my eye. Her head snapped toward us. The smirk vanished, replaced by wide-eyed confusion that quickly morphed into red-hot fury. She excused herself from her group and began cutting through the crowd toward us, her movements sharp and angry. She reached me, grabbing my elbow and yelling through a clenched smile, Nora, what the hell are you doing here? I gently but firmly removed my arm from her grasp. I kept my voice calm and professional, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. The venue requested my assistance, Madison. There seems to be a staffing shortage. Her eyes darted around, aware of the audience. She couldn't cause a scene without damaging her own carefully crafted image. The panic on her face was a fleeting, beautiful sight. I don't need your help, she hissed, her smile strained. Everything is under control. As if on cue, a man in a chef's coat appeared at her side, his expression grim. He spoke in a low, urgent tone. Miss Sinclair, the seafood supplier is here. He's demanding immediate payment for the oysters. He says you promised cash upon delivery. Madison's face went pale. She had been caught. The perfect party was starting to crumble right before her eyes. Madison tried to shoo the chef away, but it was too late. The word payment seemed to trigger other waiting vendors. The florist and the head of the valet service suddenly converged on her, all with similar concerns. The music felt too loud, the laughter of the guests now sounded forced. The party's elegant veneer was peeling away, revealing the frantic mess underneath. Madison, cornered and flustered, turned her wild eyes toward me. The condescension was still there, layered with desperation. Nora, she said, her tone implying she was doing me a favor, can you handle this? You're good with people. She waved a dismissive hand at the small crowd of upset vendors. Mr. Albright, who had been observing, pulled me aside, his face serious. This is more than just disorganization, he whispered. I think your sister is hiding something. You should see the contract she signed. He led me to a small, quiet office behind the main kitchen. On the desk, he laid out the event contract. He pointed to several clauses. Madison had indeed agreed to a price, then tried to argue it down after signing. More seriously, he showed me an addendum for premium staff gratuity that she had initialed. She promised a 20% bonus to all staff for tonight, he said. But she told me privately she never intended to pay it. She said it was a negotiation tactic. My stomach turned. Then I saw it. The signature on that particular addendum looked off. It was a clumsy imitation of the owner's smooth script. Is this forged? I whispered. Mr. Albright nodded grimly. Before he could answer, the office door opened. A tall, elegant woman with silver hair stood there, her gaze sweeping the room. It was Mrs. Vance, the owner. Her eyes landed on me. "You must be Nora," she said. "My manager tells me you're the one actually fixing things tonight. I'd like to speak with you." We moved to a quieter corner of the office. Mrs. Vance's demeanor was calm but sharp. "I've been observing the feed from my office," she stated. "You have a natural talent for this. You're calm under pressure, and you command respect without raising your voice." I was taken aback by the direct praise. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance." "I'm serious," she continued. "This venue needs a dedicated event coordinator. Someone with integrity. I'd like you to consider a formal role, running our logistics." It was a dream offer, falling into my lap in the middle of a nightmare. At that moment, Madison, who had been lurking outside, pushed the door open. She had heard enough. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated jealousy and rage. The carefully constructed composure she'd maintained for her guests was gone. Just then, a massive crash followed by a scream echoed from the main hall. We all rushed out. A guest had stumbled, slamming into the towering, elaborate dessert table Madison had personally designed. Cakes, pastries, and glassware were scattered across the floor in a sticky, ruined mess. Madison erupted. It was a terrifying, public meltdown. She didn't care who was watching anymore. She pointed a shaking finger at the clumsy guest, then at the catering staff, screaming about incompetence and carelessness. Her voice was shrill, her words cruel and personal. She even turned on me. "This is your fault. You brought this bad energy in here." For the first time, the guests didn't look sympathetic or amused. They looked uncomfortable, even disgusted. They were recoiling from her true colors. The spell was broken. As staff rushed to clean the mess, a woman, a longtime family friend named Barbara, touched my arm gently. She leaned in, her voice concerned. "Nora, you should see the check-in sheet at the VIP lounge. Something odd is happening with the payments." Frowning, I excused myself and went to the VIP check-in desk. The sheet Barbara mentioned was there. It listed guests who had paid a substantial extra deposit for premium dining upgrades, special wines and a chef's tasting menu. I cross-referenced it with the venue's own kitchen tickets. The upgrades had been ordered, but the payments never reached the venue's account. Madison had collected the cash from at least 10 guests and pocketed it herself. It was a quiet, brazen financial scandal. The journalist, a local reporter named Ben who was covering society events, had been standing nearby, observing the drama. He overheard my quiet conversation with the desk attendant. His eyes lit up with recognition. "Madison Sinclair," he murmured to me. "She was involved in an unpaid balance dispute with the Grove Hotel last year." It was hushed up. "This seems like a pattern." The journalist, Ben, looked at me expectantly, hoping for a juicy quote. I felt a surge of protective instinct, not for Madison, but for my own integrity. I would not be the source of gossip. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the venue's financial dealings," I said politely but firmly. "If you have questions, you should speak directly with Mrs. Vance or Mr. Albright. They have all the official documentation." I remained professional, ethical. It was the right thing to do. But Madison, from across the room, saw me speaking with the journalist. She couldn't hear our words, only see our serious expressions. Her face contorted with paranoia. She assumed I was selling her out, trying to ruin her life. As Ben moved away to find Mrs. Vance, a pale and shaken man approached me. It was my brother-in-law, Leo. "Nora," he said, his voice trembling. "Can we talk? Please?" I followed Leo to a secluded alcove. He looked utterly defeated. "I knew," he confessed, running a hand through his hair. "I knew she was cutting corners, lying about the budget. But I didn't know it was this bad. The forged signature, the stolen upgrades." He looked at me, his eyes full of genuine remorse. "I'm so sorry for how she's treated you. Always. It's been unbearable lately. She's been spiraling for months." His confession was shocking, but it explained so much. The extreme pressure she was under, the desperation for everything to be perfect. Then he delivered the final piece. She took out a huge personal loan, Nora. In both our names. She told the bank it was for a new business venture. She needed this party to be flawless to impress the investors she invited tonight. It was all a show. My blood ran cold. A personal loan? Investors? This was far bigger than a messy party. This was financial ruin in the making. As if summoned by the thought, a group of 3 serious-looking men in impeccably tailored suits entered the room. They stood out from the other guests immediately. These were the investors. They scanned the chaotic scene, their expressions growing increasingly skeptical. They moved toward the center of the room, looking for the host. Madison, seeing them, plastered on a brilliant, panicked smile and rushed over. I watched as she began talking rapidly, gesturing around as if the chaos was all part of the plan. One of the investors held up a hand, cutting her off. He said something to her, and then his gaze swept the room, landing squarely on me. He pointed, and they all began walking toward me. "Are you the one in charge here tonight?" the lead investor asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Madison tried to interject, to pull the focus back to herself, but the investors ignored her. They were focused on me. "I'm assisting the venue management tonight," I clarified. The lead investor, Mr. Sterling, nodded. "We can see that. You're the only person here who looks like they know what they're doing." He glanced dismissively at Madison, who looked like she might be sick. "We're concerned. Miss Sinclair's business proposal was ambitious. But seeing this disorder raises questions." I explained the situation factually, without emotion or blame. I stated that there had been some logistical and contractual misunderstandings that the venue was working to resolve. My honesty and calmness resonated with them. Mr. Sterling leaned in closer, his voice dropping. "We're impressed with your competence," he said. Then his expression grew serious. "There's something you should know. Did you know you were listed in her proposal as her operations director?" The air left my lungs. What?" I stammered. Mr. Sterling nodded grimly. "It's true. She used your name and your impeccable reputation for logistics and integrity as a key part of her pitch. She said you were fully on board." The lie was breathtaking in its audacity. She hadn't just stolen money, she had stolen my identity, my good name, to prop up her failing scheme. I felt a hot wave of anger, but I kept my composure. "I was never consulted," I said, my voice tight but controlled. "And I would never have agreed." At that exact moment, Madison, who had only heard me say I would never have agreed, burst into our circle. Her composure shattered completely. "You traitor," she shrieked, pointing a finger at me. "You're trying to steal my investors. You've always been jealous of me. You don't deserve to be here." The room fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye was on Madison as she launched into a tearful, screaming rant. She accused me of sabotaging her since we were children, of wanting her life, her success. She exposed every one of her own deep-seated insecurities in a torrent of venomous words. The guests and staff watched, stunned, as the elegant hostess completely imploded. There was no recovering from this. The mask was off, and everyone saw the real Madison, entitled, cruel, and desperate. The investors exchanged grim looks. The remaining guests began to quietly gather their things, eager to leave the uncomfortable spectacle. In the deafening silence that followed her outburst, Mrs. Vance stepped forward. She placed a firm hand on Madison's shoulder. Her voice was quiet but carried across the silent room. "Madison," she said. "We need to talk. Privately. Now." Mrs. Vance, Mr. Albright, and a sobbing Madison disappeared into the office. I stayed in the main hall, helping the remaining staff usher out the last of the guests. The party was over. After about 20 minutes, the office door opened. Madison emerged first, her face blotchy and bare of makeup, her expensive dress looking wrinkled and defeated. She didn't look at anyone as she hurried out a side exit, followed by a shell-shocked Leo. The consequences had begun. Mr. Albright approached me, holding a thin file folder. His expression was a mixture of anger and pity. "We found something else," he said, handing it to me. "Our corporate office keeps a shared database with other premium venues. We ran her name after the forgery." I opened the file. Inside were printed emails and formal complaints from 3 other high-end venues in the city. All detailed similar stories: unpaid final balances, abusive behavior toward staff, last-minute unreasonable demands, and broken contracts. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern of deception and exploitation that spanned over a year. My sister had been living this double life for a long, long time. Just then, a man in a dark suit carrying a briefcase entered the now empty venue. He introduced himself to Mr. Albright as Madison's lawyer. He had been summoned in a panic. After a brief conversation with Mr. Albright, the lawyer turned and walked directly toward me. "Nora?" he asked. "I need a moment of your time. It's about the use of your name." The lawyer, Mr. Davies, was all business. "My client listed you as a principal in her business venture. I need to know, for the record, if you were aware of this and if you give your approval for this association." My answer was immediate and firm. I was completely unaware. And I do not approve. I want my name removed from all documents immediately. Mr. Davies sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He looked weary. I was afraid of that. Then Madison is in serious legal trouble. Fraud, forgery, misrepresentation. He paused, looking uncomfortable. And she's begging for you. She thinks you can somehow fix this. I was led back to the office. Madison was slumped in a chair, her head in her hands. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red raw. "Nora, please," she begged, her voice hoarse. "You have to help me. You have to talk to them. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I did it all for the family. To give us a better life." There were no more insults, no more condescension. Just pure, naked pleading. I looked at my sister, broken and exposed. I felt a pang of sorrow, but it didn't cloud my judgment. I shook my head slowly. "I won't lie for you, Madison. I won't cover up anything illegal. I can't fix the mess you made." I saw the hope die in her eyes. I took a deep breath. "The only thing I can give you," I said, "is the truth. And my advice to start telling it yourself." I walked back into the main hall where Mr. Sterling, the investors, Mrs. Vance, and a few remaining staff were gathered. They all looked at me. I didn't speak to humiliate Madison. I spoke to reclaim my own story. "I want to be clear to everyone here," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I had no knowledge of my sister's business dealings or her use of my name. What happened here tonight was wrong, and I cannot and will not be associated with it." I looked toward the office door. Madison is my sister, and I hope she gets the help she needs. But my professional integrity is not negotiable. The room was silent. Then, Mr. Sterling nodded slowly, his respect for me evident. Mrs. Vance placed a hand on my arm. The maturity and grace I had shown in the face of such chaos had won them over completely. Mrs. Vance then pulled a document from her portfolio. "Speaking of professionalism," she said, "I'd like to make our discussion official." It was a contract. The title read, Lead Event Coordinator. The salary was more than I had ever dreamed of, with full benefits. "The position is yours, Nora," Mrs. Vance said. "We need your calm leadership." Mr. Sterling stepped forward. "And we'd be interested in discussing a consulting role with our firm," he added. "We value honesty and competence highly." In the span of a single evening, I had gone from being deemed not elegant enough to being offered 2 incredible career opportunities. I had walked in unwanted and was now leaving indispensable. As I gathered my things to leave, exhausted but triumphant, Mr. Albright walked me to the door. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. By the way, he said. Your name was the very first one Mrs. Vance wrote down for our long-term roster. We wanted you here from the very beginning. Weeks later, I stood in the same Grand Elm ballroom, now transformed for my first official event, a charity gala for a local youth shelter. The room was elegant, buzzing with positive energy, and flawlessly executed. I moved through the crowd, confident and respected in my role. I saw Madison enter. She came alone, dressed quietly, and took a seat at a table in the back. She was just another guest. At one point, she approached me, her eyes downcast. Nora, I'm so sorry. For everything. I looked at her, feeling no anger, only a quiet sense of closure. Thank you for coming, Madison, I said, my tone polite but final. I hope you enjoy the evening. Then I turned my attention back to my guests, to my new life. I had moved on, healed, and risen, not by tearing her down, but by building myself up with integrity and grace. The greatest victory was my own peace.